I've had paperwork on that for years. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Everybody. Call the finance, October finance meeting to order. This meeting on this terminology is excused for the meeting. Motion to approve the agenda. Ms. Turner, second by Perkins, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I made a motion to approve the minutes of September 25th. Perkins, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Sure. All right, first going into the resolution. This is for authorizing the chair to sign contracts for the 2022 Bridge New York project funded by the Bridge Formula Program off system for County Route 22 Bridge over Sawyer Creek, EIN 40950 and 775-425. We have a motion. Which I segment, Mr. Smith, thank you.
Yes, thank you. This resolution is the starting of the process basically to work on the replacement of the County Road 22 bridge in town of Fowler. This is 95% funded by federal funding, 5% county. The award is in excess of $2 million, and we will. The plan is to bring forward resolutions to hire a consultant, which is required under the federal aid formula to progress the project. So in the next coming months, providing this passes, we'll be moving that.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign contracts for the 2022 Bridge New York project funded by Bridge Formula Program, off system for County Route 34 Bridge, EIN 4160, EIN 775-426. A motion. Second by Ms. Forsythe, thank you.
Yes, same and for this project as well. This is a Bridge New York project. This contract will initiate the process. Again, this is an award in excess of $2 million. And again, we'll be bringing forward a resolution to hire a consulting firm to start this process in the coming months.
Any questions?
Question.
Sir.
The money coming in and the 5% that the county be responsible for, is that in 23 budget or 24? Or will it be?
That would be in the 2024 budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
What township is this?
The 34 is in the town of Potsdam. The 22 was in the town of Fowler.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor?
All right.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next one is for authorizing the chair to award and sign a construction contract for the County Route 35 Bridge over Trout Brook, EIN 3341720, PIN 755-394. And motion. Second by Ms. Forsythe, thank you.
Yes, this is the tail end of the Bridge New York program for this project. Again, this will be 95% federally funded. This is in the town of Potsdam. This project is a safety improvement as well as bridge replacement project. We will be realigning the Potsdam Morley Road as it attaches to County Road 35. So that is right at that intersection, and we're moving the legs of Potsdam Morley Road back further away from the intersection to improve the intersection safety at that location. So there'll be street realignment, intersection improvement, bridge replacement, and a safety project all in one.
Any questions? Mr. Perkins?
I'll be expanding due to my employment.
Ms. Kern, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna say good job on, that's an intersection that's kind of a bugger.
It is. We've been waiting a while to get the funding on this project. It's been on the shelf, so to speak, with the plans ready to go. And funding became available for it, and we are.
Mr. Nish, did you have a question? Sorry, I saw you look up. I'm gonna go with no. I'm gonna go with no. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next up is item D, authorizing the chair to award and sign construction contract for Lazy River Road Bridge over Grass River, BIN 3341820, PIN 775322. And motion. Karen, thank you.
This project again is Bridge New York funded, 95% federal, 5% county. This project will be constructed during the 2024 construction season. The existing structure has several safety and structural flags on it from the state of New York. It is a 3-span structure currently. We are going to a single span structure, and also significant geometry changes to the approach and the structure itself. We did have a fatality at this location, and it should address some of the geometric items that need to be.
Discussion? Ms. Forsythe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last 4 bridge project, 2024,
2 for design, 2 for construction.
busy year.
It will be. And both of these will be in 2024.
Great.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have modifying the 2023 Department of Highways budget for overtime supplies, paving, material, and machinery rental. Motion, Mr. second by Mr. Whitfield. Thank you.
Thank you. As you can see in the lines lower in the budget, there's areas, or in the resolution, there's items to increase revenue, increase appropriations, decrease appropriations, so and increase appropriations for in different areas. But basically modifying the budget, moving items around where we can to cover our actual costs that we anticipate to incur in 2023, and also increase the revenue lines where we're anticipating additional revenues.
Any discussion? All those opposed, or all those in favor, sorry.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
And for highway, we have adopting the intersection evaluating policy in Orange County. Any motion? Forsythe, second by Ms. Karen. Thank you. Chambers.
Yeah. In recent years, there's been requests coming forward for intersection evaluation. And we've been using this policy, although unwritten, as a county policy. We have been using the federal and state guidelines of the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices and the New York supplement. However, this would put it in writing as a county policy that we're following these guidelines for intersection review and design, and that we would be looking at it at least every 5 years to update that policy. You know, and of course, if there were changes in federal regulation, we'd have to come back quicker than a 5-year period. But a 5-year, we feel that a 5-year period of review is sufficient.
Discussion, Mr. Forsythe.
Yeah, Don, I read some of this. So is this kind of complaint driven like the roads are now? If we go to a town board meeting and someone says there's a 6-inch drop, is it kind of initiated via that way, or?
Yes, if we get a request through the town board or something like that, at least For legislators and for my staff, we all have a clear, this is how we do this. And the items that are in italics that are in the, are direct quote from the manual of uniform traffic control devices. So that's like our code book. So we didn't reinvent the wheel. All that language is directly out of the. So we have the federal MUTCD, and then you have a New York supplement where New York State adds things to the federal specs. So we're following federal code, state code, and then just putting it into this policy.
Yeah, there's one in Potsdam somewhere that, for regular private passenger cars, it's not a problem with a tree or something, but with tractor trailers, I guess it's a nightmare. So I'll search out, see which one that was. Someone brought it up.
But again, it does address even for vegetation
Yeah,
and
okay,
all those
good.
things, so that we have a standard policy and addressing these issues.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, John, if there's some complaints and you find an issue, is there a time frame that you have to complete this by to, in case for liability purposes?
Well, we would, I left that purposely, that we didn't have a time frame on that. Because if I have to come back to the board and say, hire a specialized consultant, it might take longer than if we can review this within internal staff. So it depends on the degree of complexity and issues that may be involved. So I think it's wise to not pin it down to a time frame, because there may be financial or contractual obligations that we have to deal with. But my intention is to, when we get a complaint, immediately look into the situation and start the process.
If there's an issue, you could put out some sort of caution signals or something like that.
Whatever's appropriate, and there is a progression of how you deal with that, and that is listed right in this policy as well. There is, you do a progression of improvements. You don't step to the most, because that's not the most prudent as far as expenditures. You go through the steps and you make improvements as needed.
Thank you.
John, what determines if it's a county intersection?
If it's, the New York State law is written in the higher municipality controls the intersection. So when a county road comes into a state or federally designated highway, the state would control the intersection. If it's a town road intersecting or village street intersecting a county road, the county controls the intersection. That means like the stop aheads and whatever that might be on the town road would be all county signs.
Mr. Chair, so would it be prudent on our part, once we pass this, if it passes, okay, so we'll to do a press release, let people know that this is now an option, because it's pretty important. You know, and I bet there's a lot of intersections we're not thinking of that may fall into that.
But this is the process that, you know, that is laid out for the federal and state sites.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have county attorney, Steve, what? Resolutions for authorizing services of Simmons, Hanley, Conroy, LLC, to assist the county attorney investigation, possible litigation against manufacturers, including the pharmacy benefit, including price gouging. They can spare us that, Ms. Forsythe. Sure.
Thank you. The first resolution that you have before you this evening would allow the county attorney to go ahead and secure the services of Simmons, Hanley, Conroy, and most likely bringing a suit against a number of different manufacturers as well as pharmacy benefit managers with respect to price gouging on insulin. 6 years ago, a lawsuit was commenced that alleged that these various entities had engaged in a monopoly of the market on insulin. In doing so, they had driven up the prices for all users of that service. We have 10.5% of all New Yorkers suffering from diabetes and requiring an insulin. So you're talking about a significant portion of New York State's population actually requiring that medication. Earlier this year in May, one of the main manufacturers, Eli Lilly, actually struck an agreement with the various litigants whereby they would cap the price of insulin at $35. They would also pay out roughly $13.5 million on $1 billion worth in claims. Many of the municipalities that saw that this was occurring, many of the states objected to this settlement and indicated they intended to bring their own actions. By authorizing the retention of Simmons, Hamley, Conroy, that's in fact what we would do, would be to commence our own action against these entities. There are still numerous lawsuits that are going on with this. As I indicated, there are multiple manufacturers, multiple PBMs. Inside the county, we operate two major plans, both our health insurance plan for our employees as well as the self-insured workers' compensation plan that does provide insulin for our plan participants. So we have a direct and pecuniary loss that we can articulate that I believe would be appropriate for us to seek recompense.
Sure.
Just in what we do alone in insulin, how much money are we talking about?
Unfortunately, at this point, I couldn't definitively state. But once again, we're talking about 1/10 of New York State's population, and if we carry those numbers over and apply them to our population of plan participants as well as employees, that's a significant amount. And I'll note, the federal government announced this year that they were in fact establishing a cap on Medicaid expenses to cap insulin at $35. Interestingly, I don't recall anyone announcing that that was part of the settlement back in May. But that was in fact part of the settlement back in May. Another reason why there was such objection from a number of different states, because the states believed that if the federal government was going to go ahead and mandate it, then it shouldn't be a part of the settlement. They should be able to negotiate their own settlements. So a number of different states decided to file suit separate and distinct from the actions brought by the individual users as well as the federal government. Mr. Hall.
What's the estimated county cost for this initial exploratory project?
The good news is that the firm that I'll be retaining, they don't get anything unless we get something. It's on a straight contingency fee agreement. The contingency fee agreement ranges based on the amount of recovery. The percentage ranges on the amount of the recovery. So at the lower end, you're talking about it as little as 20%. At the higher end, you're talking about as much as 33 and 30%. Now, the interesting thing about the way that these class action suits are settled is oftentimes that payment is separate and distinct from the recovery of the individual litigants, and it is paid out of a separate fund that is oftentimes structured by the defendants. And I didn't mention, but the defendants, including Eli Lilly, are also facing criminal prosecution.
If I may, is the firm Simmons, Hamley, Conroy, are they also representing other similarly situated clients?
They are, and they are also representing us with respect to our opiate litigation.
Mr. Burke. Steve, what did you say this?
That's normally the law firm, but as I indicated, typically that is not deducted from our share of recovery. It is normally extracted from a separate pool of money that's set aside to pay the fees of the attorney associated with class action.
Did we get 40% of the opioids for the leverage?
Actually, I didn't have an opportunity to talk to you all about this, but none of the money associated with our recovery is being deducted to pay attorney's fees is coming from a totally separate pot of money that was structured associated with these settlements. So we will see no reduction in our recovery. Saturday.
Oh, Mr. Button, is there a statute that limits it? Can it go over 33 and a third, or can it go to as much as 40 for their contingency fee?
Well, it's actually subject to federal approval. So to be honest, I am not familiar with any settlement that is permitted attorney fees to exceed 33 to 30%. And once again, because it was brought in a class action suit, my expectation is that any recovery that we receive will not be diminished by the attorney's fees that will be pulled from 27.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Lake.
What effect do you see for individuals that aren't currently covered under, say, St. Lawrence County's insurance and, either have their own or some other source of it? What effect will a positive outlook for St. Lawrence County and the other counties that this firm represent have on any of those folks?
So the interesting thing about this suit is that it was premised on the notion that when insulin was created, it was provided to a university. The formula was actually provided to a university with the expectation that it would be open and free source to all users. With the expectation, obviously, that the price of insulin and manufacturer would be kept down. These folks that actually ended up securing the rights to it and continuing to manufacture it, marketed and gathered 9% of the actual market itself. And in doing so, essentially monopolized the production and distribution of insulin. It is our hope, long-term, that we will be able to structure an agreement that will result in all users receiving the reduced rate that is commensurate with actual production costs and not having the exorbitant PBM and manufacturer expenses that have been tossed on maintained. We are hoping that at a bare minimum, they will continue to manufacture, produce, and distribute at $35 per insulin dosage, rather than at what they have been in the past, which at one point insulin was as much as $1,200 a pop.
Sure.
$35 a month or $35 a dose?
It was my understanding that they were capping Medicaid at $35 a dose. I do understand that they are trying to get that down lower, and the feds on the Medicaid have capped it at whatever the prescription amount is. So I think there's always goes out on monthly at 35.
Doesn't say $35 a dose.
I just got a heads up from Medicare that what they are looking at is that $35 would cover the amount you would use in a month. And normally now insulin is provided on a 3-month basis. Being insulin dependent, I'm very aware of what's going on with this. And I will tell you that I get a 3-month supply, which amounts to 800 milliliters. And it is in excess of $2,500 that the provider charges for that. That is not what Medicare pays, but that's what the charge is. Medicare ends up paying about half of that. The rest is regulated by Medicare as far as the amount of copay that they can charge the individual. So it ain't cheap by any means. It's not cheap. And
Right now, the only commitment that they have been able to secure out of the ongoing litigation is $35 per monthly dosage for Medicaid and Medicare, and we're seeking to extend it up.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have setting a date for a public hearing on proposed local law B for year 2023, setting policy or acquisition and sale of tax delinquent property in St. Lawrence County. And get a motion.
Thank you. The resolution you have before you would establish a public hearing date to modify our local law with respect to St. Lawrence County's policy and provisions related to our real property tax enforcement and foreclosure. As I think the board is aware, I have a very soft spot in my heart for the real property tax enforcement. I spend a fair amount of time working on that with the treasurer's office. We're very close on that. And we've been able to really sort of changed the face of St. Lawrence County with our foreclosure and enforcement. A lot of that has been done through our blighted property program, which the board established, through our environmental contamination cleanups that we've been working on with DEC and with the oil spill fund out of the comptroller's office. So we've had a spectacular amount of success over the course of the last 10 years. This past year, there was a major case that went before the United States Supreme Court. It's called Tyler versus Hennepin County, Minnesota. And in that case, the court was called upon to answer the question as to whether or not the retention of any excess that exceeded the amount of the tax delinquency by a taxing jurisdiction on foreclosure amounted to a taking under the takings clause of the United States Constitution. And the United States Supreme Court resounded in a 9-0 decision, really 7 in the majority with the 2 concurrents, ruled that the ability of a municipality to retain that extra money that exceeded the tax delinquency did constitute a taking. What they discussed in the dicta, the additional portion of the decision, was what municipalities should be looking to do, how they should be making sure that they continue to protect the interests of the taxpayer. And one of the things that they really broke down was the imposition of a redemption date that would make it difficult or hard on individuals to be able to recover their property. And they indicated that they did not particularly care for arbitrary or capricious dates. We have a date that is actually far in excess of what is provided under state statute. Our date of last redemption is 30 days prior to the auction. That auction is held every September. And if you recall, a few years ago, we came before the board, we asked the board to actually modify the date that we had at that point. The date that we had at that point was that the last date of redemption could occur right up until the auction. Then we moved to 30 days before. Well, the real recommendation that the Supreme Court is making is to abolish your last date of redemption. Allow the taxing jurisdiction unfettered discretion to be able to accept repayment where they can, and even if it occurs during the middle of the auction. So this first local law that you would have before you would in fact abolish our last date of redemption. It would give the board an incredible amount of authority with respect to accepting late payment on taxes. It would give the treasurer an incredible amount of authority to accept late payment on taxes on those periods prior to judgment. But it would effectively help individuals who may be tax delinquent to secure their properties back, or otherwise they previously would have been included in doing so under our local law. The separate change that is included in this local law was the addition of the blighted property program. As you may have noticed, we previously adopted provisions in this local law that allowed for the environmental contamination component, our cleanups of those commercial properties. Well, as you know, last year we started up our blighted property program. It's been fairly good so far. We actually managed to deal with the first 5 properties. We're intending on stretching that out in this upcoming year, and the Supreme Court gave us guidance on how to do that as well, which was wonderful. So this would add in the blighted property program and our ability to continue that discussion. Support that.
Thank you, Mr. How many examples this year would you have had of people that called and said, yeah, I can pay it before? How percentage-wise do you think?
Well, we commence against a significant amount. Every November, we commence against a fairly large amount. Historically, it's been between 2,700 and 3,000 properties that we've commenced against. This year, we're fewer than that. We commenced this past year against approximately 2,100. By the time we got the judgment in June, we were down to about 300. By the time we got to the last day of redemption, we were down to about 150. On that 30-day period, in between our current last date of redemption and the auction, probably talking about 10 to 15. So you're talking about roughly 10% of those that were remaining. So any effort or any opportunity to extend the option of being able to redeem the property, the Supreme Court was encouraging.
Okay.
Steve, if I heard you correctly, if we do away with the deadline for redemption, isn't that gonna possibly create kind of a chaotic atmosphere when we do have the tax auction, if they can redeem it in the middle of the auction, even after it started?
Interestingly, no, and here, allow me to explain why. As I indicated, the board's last date of redemption was significantly further into the process than the state's. By removing your last date of redemption, drop dead deadline established by law, we actually default to the states. And the states says your last date of redemption is April 1st, unless the local government actually extends to you a courtesy or discretion to allow redemption. By removing our drop dead date, it becomes a discretionary call in those periods. Now, up to the date of judgment becomes the treasurer's responsibility. By real property tax law provision, the treasurer remains the complete controller of those properties until we acquire title. The moment we acquire title, under county law, the board then gets a say in what happens with those properties. So even though that last day of redemption hits, if the board took no action, the treasurer took no action, the last day of redemption would actually default to the state's last day of redemption. By getting rid of that hard and black line that we've got with respect to our own last day of redemption, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of discretion that comes in. Now, this board may decide that they're not going to extend that courtesy of redemption in the middle of the auction. If you take a look at the decision from Hennepin, it actually does suggest that we should be giving greater allowances to individuals to redeem. And they actually had some back and forth discussion about it during the course of oral argument. What would you do if an individual in the middle of auction showed up and said, my tax delinquency was $25. I should be allowed to redeem my property. The court, in its oral argument in that discussion, said that it would work an injustice to allow the auction to move forward if the delinquency was so de minimis as to deprive them of the property merely for that $25. So I do understand the concern that that could be somewhat chaotic. It could wreak havoc. But I think it forces us into a situation where we really have to treat these properties on a case by case basis.
Mr. Hill? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just Ms. asked a similar question that I had, just trying to understand the sort of logistical potential, traffic jam potentially at the day of the auction. And if a delinquent owner were to, I guess my question is, does that, is it the location of the auction where the delinquent owner needs to make their repayment known, or they come to the county? I guess, is that even the place where that would happen?
So let me begin by saying, just because the removal of the last redemption date within our local law occurs, doesn't mandate the board take any action. It provides you the discretion to take action. I'm going to tell you that the law actually encourages it. And I would suggest that you abide by the suggestion of the Supreme Court that's different, but it doesn't mandate. If the board took no action and continued to move forward with auction because the last date of redemption is currently, or would be currently established by state law rather than our own local. But no one could allege, were they agreed that it was the county's last date of redemption that had acted as an impediment to their ability to recover. Sorry, then. If your follow-up right to your question, go ahead. No, yeah, Mr. Burke, in a second.
In the proposed scenario, when does the county take possession?
The county would still take possession of the property sometime in June or July when we secure judgment. There's a lis pendens that would be filed right before the notice of petition. The lis pendens gives notice to the entire world. It's a nice, wonderful Latin term. Lawyers love their Latin. Nice, wonderful Latin term that means literally a thing pending that attaches to the real property and gives the world notice that the property is encumbered by a debt, by a lien, and by a legal action. We then commence the legal action during that time period. Even though we haven't taken possession of the property, the world is on notice that the property is subject to our interest. When we secure judgment is the time in which the judge actually gives us notice that we are permitted to file title into our name, subject to the discretionary right of redemption, should the board wish to exercise.
So in your proposed proposed scenario, we can take title in June. And then for those people paying after that, we would have to deed title back over to.
That's right.
Mr. Elton? Good. Ms. Perkins?
I guess I'm a little confused. You said we do this here, that it would, go back to what the state's date is, which is April 1st.
It is.
So that would be the drop dead date then, wouldn't it?
No, technically not.
That doesn't make sense.
So what the state law indicates is that the locality has the jurisdiction and the authority to exercise its discretion post April 1st. So if you did nothing, it would be deemed to have effectuated a severance as of April 1st. You don't have to do anything past that. And as I just answered Mr. Hall, even though you don't have to, I'm strongly suggesting you do so because the Supreme Court actually strongly suggested in its oral argument that you should exercise that discretion. But what we would be doing would be removing any declared impediment of our own to the ability to read.
If I may, so wouldn't that kind of, we're gonna take each case by case basis. We're gonna start setting precedents, correct? For one, if we start doing something for one, somebody else may be able, can sue us because we did it before and didn't do it for them. And it's probably gonna be a nightmare for Auctions International and people wanting to purchase property, and somebody's coming right up at the last minute.
This is going to be a difficulty on Auctions International, no doubt. But the people purchasing the property under the law are not the ones protected. And the Supreme Court made it most abundantly clear that taxpayers are the ones that have to be protected.
Right, but if you've got them and they want to buy that, and then all of a sudden at the last minute, it's not on the auction block. It's gonna cause a lot of confusion.
I do understand, but the Supreme Court's decision strongly suggests that we make it easier on the tax delinquent than the tax acquirer.
But it wouldn't set precedents, us doing one versus another differently.
No, and in fact, the beauty of the decision that came out of Hennepin is that it talks about the fact that each of these delinquents needs to be treated separate and distinct. And in fact, we used to, prior to the Hennepin decision, be able to treat the tax foreclosure as a group action. We didn't have to distinguish between the recoveries on each individual property. Now, as a result of the Hennepin decision, we do. So we have to treat these as separate and distinct actions.
Any other discussion? Mr. Forsythe?
Okay. I'm gonna lose my property. The auction's not a 1 day, it's 7 days, right? So it starts the week before, you watch the bidding. So you're unable to get a hold of the county treasurer. It's on a Saturday, right? That's the last day of redemption, I believe.
Yep.
So you're unable to get a hold of the county treasurer or the county attorney and say, yeah, I want to redeem my property 1 minute before when all the action starts going, and you miss it. But your attempt was there. So Monday morning, did they call and redeem their property based on?
Theoretically, yes.
Right.
The sale has not been consummated as of yet. It technically doesn't close until the auction closes.
And it puts that person in an advantage. Now they know what the value of the property is, potential value of their property, it's the way it against the taxes. And, yeah, interesting.
Sean?
Mr. Chair, have we considered obviously there's a public hearing and just the actual, this is about the law going into effect, but will there be any attempt to make these changes clear to those to whom they'll be relevant, people who are behind on their taxes, or if there are these pending?
So I'm a part of a group working right now on a piece of state legislation that will address a lot of issues that are common. One of those issues that's included and really being pushed in Albany is enhanced notification requirements, both on redemption and on value. So yes, I do foresee that. We had a meeting of the stakeholders before the Assembly and the Senate this past week. During the course of that committee meeting, The special interest groups representing the debtor, insisted on enhanced notification requirements, and I didn't hear any objections coming from the state reps. My expectation is that that will be included in any draft that is ultimately approved. There is an expectation that that draft, whatever draft it is, and there are currently 4 circulating around, but all 4 have notification. Whatever draft is ultimately approved and signed by the governor, will be approved prior to the end of session in this upcoming year, with the expectation that it will be enacted sometime before July 1st of 2024. So yes, I do anticipate that there will be an enhanced notification.
Mr. Burton.
Today's point, so the auction is going on, and public information vote against it. So we've had history. Somebody is the owner, made a lot. That's not like might come forward. But the other 85% of people who property is closed, the sale of their property, the ultimate revenue they might get back after taxes are paid is diminished, because we're throwing a wrench into a system that has pretty much reduced positive sales of tax credit companies. So you're darned if you do and darned if you don't. And who do we protect the 85% that stand to get something back after taxes are paid, or do we protect 15%?
Well, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, I can give you a much worse hypothetical. But the Hennepin decision really created a huge problem in about 20 states that handle real property tax foreclosures in the manner that we do. And New York State is a hybrid state that has both the lien sale model as well as the collection and enforcement model, which is what we adhere to under the RMTO. But one of the things that happens when we secure judgment is we wipe out all unsecured creditors. We wipe out all lien holders. We essentially wipe out everything that's out there, including existing mortgages on the property. Now, what if you had an individual that theoretically decided to take out a loan, $100,000 loan, and keep it easy? Takes a $100,000 loan, pays on their mortgage, doesn't pay on their taxes. The property comes up for foreclosure. We wipe out the lien. We then sell it. It sells at the auction for $100,000. Taxes were only $3,000. We keep our $3,000. We got to turn over the $97,000 to the tax with the mortgage we wiped out.
Sure. Wasn't there something in here or discussion earlier about the property being abandoned?
Yes.
Is there something within that?
Yes. So one of the things that the United States Supreme Court, as a part of the Hennepin decision, discussed is that there are dual tracks in which you can move on foreclosure. One track is the traditional non-payment of taxes. The other track, it is actually on the basis of abandonment of the property, and it's proven by several criteria, empirical data that you can actually secure and identify and plead that out in a separate way. This is something we are looking very closely at as a part of the state legislation that is being discussed. I think I heard Mr. Berg reference the other 85%. Large portion of that other 85% would most likely fall under the criteria for abandonment. Just requires a whole bunch of additional work to establish that a property has in fact been abandoned. If state legislation modified the abandonment statutes in such a way as to make it more conducive, I wouldn't be surprised to see that other 85% rest in the modifications of those abandonment statutes.
Any other party shots? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, be authorizing the transfer of appointing authority clear titles from the Department of Social Services legal unit to the office. Open. Sorry. Open. I just started.
If we didn't do the setting the date.
My apologies, sorry. This resolution for setting a date, for public hearing, proposed law for the year 2023.
Is that
Yeah, local law C. Oh, I see. Jeez. Local law C, yeah, it's amending local law 3 for the year 1993, St. Lawrence County installing payment of town, county, and school real property tax law. I know all of these. We have a motion for that. Mr. Bennett, thank you. Second by Mr. Hall, appreciate it. Go ahead, sir. We've done enough for you.
Here. As the board is aware, we are in the process of transitioning over all of the enforcement component of the city of Ogdensburg's real property tax collection. They will handle initial collections, but as they turn over a warrant, much like the other towns and villages, and will take over on the enforcement. Part of the enforcement part of the collection, and in keeping with the prior local law that we just discussed, we wanted to be able to extend out to residents of the city of Ogdensburg the same benefits that are extended out to the town and village residents. So we had to go back and take a look at the local laws that were in existence. They governed our real property tax law collection and enforcement, and this one in particular is of interest. This would permit city residents to be able to participate in the installment plans that we have for our collections on taxes. In 1993, when this local law was passed, it specifically exempted city residents and city businesses from being able to participate. But now, as a result of us taking over that activity, this would enable the city residents to be a part of the installment plan. So I would request that this resolution be passed as a public hearing.
Questions? Yes.
I believe Bruce Green is joining us tonight. Bruce, are you there?
Yes, I am, Ruth.
Hi, if you
Hi there.
could have Bruce speak to the work that Ogdensburg before you. Go ahead, Bruce, from his office.
Okay, thank you. So to give you a little background, what the process is this year is the city of Ogdensburg wants the St. Lawrence County to produce a joint city and county tax bill starting for January 1, 2024. This is a little different than what we've done in the past. The past 20 years or so or more, the city had produced the bill that went out in April that included the county portion of that bill on their city bill. 2 years ago then, they requested that would be split, that process would be split. So the county produced its own county bill for city residents, and the city of Ogdensburg produced their own city bill that went out again in April. Now they are requiring the county put those two together, and we produce those. We have met as three departments, both the treasurer's office, county attorney's office, and our office approximately 3 weeks ago to discuss the preliminary steps of making this happen. I think it's doable at this point. The city has told us that they have already created what they needed to do through council to make this happen on their end. They would have their budget adopted by December 1st and provided to us, the real property office, for us to produce that bill. So I think that should be fine. It's going to make more work for our office, but as long as we get their information like we do from all other towns this time of year, the other 32 towns, to create that bill, this could happen. So that's where we stand. We expect to have a meeting this Thursday with the city and to work out a few more particulars. They plan to do a 3 installment plan like towns do. So that's the new process going forward this year.
they don't have.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Ruth.
The question was, what happens if you don't pass a budget? Augsburg, sorry, thank you.
Well, I'm not sure. You'd have to ask Steve or the council on that if they don't pass their own budget in time. I know there's been some issues that way, but our process is really just a standard thing that we do each year, whether we're doing school bills, village bills, or in this case, town bills. This would be a city county tax bill, and we would use their budget in order to produce the end result.
Thank you. Obviously, we all remain. City of Ogdensburg will pass a budget in time fashion. Our work on this is conditioned on them being able to do so. Because on presentation of the budget, we're able to prepare the billings as we need to for elections. But assuming they do not pass a budget, it is a concern that the taxes that they would be levying in this upcoming year would not be able to be placed on the billings and sent out to the residents in the manner in which we would need to do so in our obligation. I do believe, at least based on what I've seen reported, that they are moving in a fashion to adopt a budget. I believe that they did accept the preliminary budget so far, but that was subject to certain modifications. I don't know if those modifications have been taken. But assuming that they are able to reach a final conclusion to that budget and present to us the bill as we expect, to present to us the budget as we expect, any timely fashion, we should be able to prepare the bills as we move.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, now. You still think? Now I'll go in where I was, see if coachable. Got it. The final resolution for county attorney is authorizing the transfer of appointing authority of clerical titles from the Department of Social Services legal unit to the Office of the County Attorney. Ms. Perry, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. As you may recall, on April 5th of 2021, the board voted to switch over the responsibilities of the legal management of the Department of Social Services Law 66 attorneys that were rendering legal services to the Department of Social Services starting on May 3rd of 2021. That process has been ongoing since May 3rd of 2021. At that time, there were 5 attorney titles that were converted to assistant county attorneys. But what that did was it left 5 titles that were clerical still sitting in the Department of Social Services under the appointing authority of the Commissioner of Social Services, much like the Social Services Law 66 attorneys. Those clerical have remained under the Commissioner of Social Services, but have not been under my appointment. The resolution that is before you would be the first step that we would have to take in order to transition those titles out from underneath the Commissioner's appointing authority under the county attorney's appointing authority so that I could continue to direct their work in the manner that I needed to and oversee their activities. Now, this would not change the work that they are doing. They would remain part of the same bargaining unit that they are a part of. So that would not change either. The bargaining unit and the employees would have the opportunity to raise objection if they did so in a timely fashion doing this. However, I have been advised by our HR director that the union president has at least expressed a desire not to challenge and is accepting of the move. And quite frankly, it's very pragmatic and very practical. Those folks are actually working under my direction and under my auspices, and this would be the consummation of that move that occurred or started to occur in April of 2021.
And the reimbursement would remain.
They would remain in the Department of Social Services budget. The big change is the chain of command. Big change is the appointing authority. Internally, this would have some real significance because my office would take over the management of those titles. Right now, a lot of the management of those titles is actually occurring in the commission office and outside of, I can direct their work, but I can't direct their administration.
Mr. Burke?
So, is there an actual physical change? Are they moving from TSS to your office?
They are, and in fact, that was part of the concern here, was making sure that the work location under the appointed authority consisted with their title. So the expectation is that these clerical individuals will move into a renovated conference room that is over in the county attorney's office. Some of them will actually move into the open. But it's our hope prior to January 1st of this year, that all of those clerical positions would actually be physically situated in the county attorney's office.
So, they don't answer to me. Or at least I assume, maybe not on paper they did. But I guess my question is are they viewed contract? Your department, viewed as contract? Yes,
It is not. So right now, we have certain positions that are under cost recovery. Right now, we also have certain positions that are actually running through the DSS budget. They will continue, these titles will continue to run through the DSS budget until some later date when we'll reevaluate. I know Ruth and I have had a number of conversations about what is the preferential manner to go. Certain counties have their county attorney's office contract directly. Some of them do what we are doing right now, which is certain titles are actually housed within the DSS budget for recovery, and certain titles which are not housed within DSS go through a cost allocation recovery. My title, the county attorney's title, actually goes through cost allocation. Many of my, two of my county attorney positions actually go through cost allocation. However, 4 of them do not. 4 of them actually run through the DSS budget. The big change here is that while operationally I can direct what work they do, that is where the extent of my ability to direct their action ceases. After that, it all goes to DSS. If there is an administrative function, if there is disciplinary action, and these are all things that have to be handled by DSS, I can't get under the current one.
it certainly makes sense to have them on your office. My only concern is difference in what a DSS staff gets versus what move both sides of that dimension that it changes by 8 to 10%.
Sure, there will be no, at this moment, there is no anticipated move out of the current budget process. So even with a change in the appointing authority, they will still be run through the DSS budget.
Sure.
So they will actually be in a less populated area than they are. They're pretty crunched into the legal services.
Yes, that's my expectation.
Second.
Does this involve 6 or 7?
5.
Other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next up, Haggard, requesting assistance for the Hancock Office, Public Service Commission and Federal Communications Commission in dealing with the uncertainty of planning the broadband with and around Frontier Communications Service area. Motion. Aaron, second, Mr. Burke. Haggard.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is another NISAC resolution that we brought forward. Connect All, as you'll remember, is the program that New York State has set up to filter the money that's coming from the federal government for broadband expansion. This is simply a request that the offices work together, Public Service Commission and FCC, in dealing with this one, very large, provider, Frontier Communications, because they've already been granted several, chunks of money to provide rural, specifically rural opportunity fund for multiple communities. And as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chief, we really had to cobble together providers to connect everything, no pun intended, connect all. But in this way, this would help for continuity's sake and get the recommendation from these offices. I ask for its action.
Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. This, we have, their website. Calling on the Adirondack Park Agency, the ADA, to update its telecommunications policy. In the motion, Mr. Burke, second by Mrs. Burke. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This originated from Senator Steck. Last week, I believe, when he was here, he touched on it a bit, and then in his weekly newsletter, he mentioned it again, and I thought it was important to bring it up. We had talked about this when we were talking about towers, I don't know, about a month and a half ago now, probably. And I said, when does public safety trump the aesthetics or the aesthetics of these towers? The law was written back 21 years ago, hasn't been updated. They're building the towers shorter, not as tall. They're not as efficient. They're not working efficiently. So I think it's time that they update it substantially in visibility. And then that's their criteria. And public safety is not mentioned. The amount of cell phone usage is not mentioned. When you drive through Lowville and you look at the windmills on the ridges, you can see them for miles. It's not mentioned, so it's time that the APA steps back a little bit and acknowledges that these are public safety without a doubt, and I hope everyone supports it.
Mr. Nisha. Go ahead, Mr. Nisha.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor to this resolution, please.
Any other discussion? Mr. Reed?
I'd like to offer, hopefully a friendly amendment, but an amendment nevertheless, to the first whereas, to say, whereas reliable cellular service is not just a quality of life issue, it is a matter of life and death, as well as public safety in rural areas. I really don't think that some of the people who are making decisions on this subject realize what the current policies are doing in terms of jeopardizing the lives of people in the rural parts of New York State. Quite a few years ago, there was an uproar about the lack of cell service along the Northway after some New York City residents got into accidents and were killed, and some of them were badly injured, and they tried to call on their cell phones for help, and they couldn't get cell service. And the New York City tabloids went nuts. Why is there no cell service along the Northway for, you know, our New York City residents traveling out in the boondocks of the Northway? Well, what about the rest of us? And I think we need to drive home the point
that it's not just public safety, because a lot of them don't really care about public safety. What hopefully they care about or need to be educated about is that, or God forbid, someone gets into an accident, someone gets badly injured, having that cell service could be a matter of life and death for the families of the citizens of the North Country.
Mr. Alden.
As a proud Adirondack 46er, I wholeheartedly support this resolution. I looked at it.
What's that?
I would accept that as a friendly.
Good.
I would also like to be added as a co-sponsor to this.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Yeah. Well, and then vacancy review committee.
So we have two departments that bring you tonight. Requests from, first is Highway Department, and the second is from Neola, the Workforce Investment or Innovation Opportunity Act. So we'll have Superintendent Kramer speak to two abolish and create requests this evening. Donna?
Thank you. The first item is the abolish grade for motor equipment mechanic. The position is vacant due to a retirement, and the title was a slash title, heavy equipment operator slash motor equipment mechanic. Whereas this individual or this position resided in the maintenance shop 100% of the time. So having a slash title is just not necessary. The mechanic, as I said, stays in the shop or the service call, they're not an option.
Questions?
Does the removal of the slash reduce the salary of this role, or is it just simplifies the title?
It just simplifies the title, but that's actually been standardized to state titles. This is next. This is welder position becoming a heavy equipment operator. This is on one of our bridge crews. The welder position has, this is even a promotion, but the welder position has, we do have already existing ones in the department. And the construction type of bridges that we're going to now for the last several decades have been going away from welded connections of steel to either bolted steel connections or precast concrete. So the need for welders. This is one pay grade. In keeping with what our
Questions?
Do mechanics still weld? I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, still have welding capacity for repair, right?
we do. We have a few welder positions, and we actually have a welder that's in our shop that could also go out to the field to do fabrication or repairs. So not that we're doing away with all of our welders, but I think slow transition over to having as many.
Yes. Is Zoom tonight? Pam, can you hear us?
Barely, but I can.
Yes. You.
So this is a keyboard specialist vacancy that is vacant due to the individual leaving for other employment. The keyboard specialist is the first point of contact for anyone entering the One Stop Career Center. They answer phones, greet customers, direct them to the appropriate staff, as well as support the employment training counselors so that they can perform the tasks they need to do to meet all our regulations by maintaining participant files, numerous databases, and updating forms. With the addition of another unit coming in to utilize one of the classrooms, we expect the traffic to increase as well, which supports the need to fill this position.
And this has been vacant for a little over a month, Pam?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Any questions for Pam? Okay. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda this evening is an update on the American Rescue Plan Act funds. I have spoken with Chair Reagan about convening the group. We'll actually be meeting this Wednesday afternoon, being hosted by the IDA to have a discussion about the funds that the county has approved for IDA administration. They have, I think, taken a look at where funds have been spent quickly and spent well, and where some funds may be languishing in getting out into the public and used. So they have some recommendations they'd like to bring to the committee, which in turn would bring those back before this board to take a look at, reconsider, and allow, if the board chooses to approve those funds to be reallocated. So that meeting will take place this week. I would imagine at the board meeting next week, I'll be able to give you an update. Chair Reagan can share the outcome of that meeting and the plan going forward. Questions?
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Doyle, is this in anticipation of the fact that we have to have this money allocated by the end of 2024? Or is it something that that's correct, right?
Well, I think in that we've gone over the change to the final rule, this last, I believe in the last 45 days. I think this gave them an opportunity also with further guidance to take a look at those totals, which you've seen the breakdown of in recent months. And I think looking at some of the areas where the spend happened very quickly and all the funds have been spent, they also see a need where some of the funds that aren't being spent could be shifted. And so I think it's a combination. They don't want to wait until next year when they know there's a demand. And if funds aren't going to be used as we intended, leave some of those funds potentially in that area in case a need presents, but potentially allow it to move where there is a greater need. Sure.
Thank you. And I think the intent is to, we've been very successful at getting these funds all across the county to a lot of small outfits and have a real impact. And, you know, but in some of the categories, we've just had very, very few requests. And it just seems a poor use of this funding opportunity to leave it in these areas where we know it's not going to move, and instead to move it into areas that there's high demand. So that's the IDA's goal. I know that's my own goal. And we'll be bringing it to the ARPA committee, Wednesday, and, we'll see, you know, what the will of the committee is, and we'll bring it back to the board for its guidance.
Any other questions on ARPA? The other mention that I would make, and I can share through our planning office director, some of the spend, we can share that with you electronically following up, but the guidance I've received is that the spend on the water and sewer projects is ramping up. And we're seeing some of those funds being requested. That was a little bit different than some of the 90-10, which you may recall we sent in some of the situations, like rental property extension, like the government fair. We did the 90-10. So we provided them with 90% of the funding and then maintained the 10% so that we could reconcile all of the information we need in order to provide that in the audit and reporting processes. This setup is a little bit different in that we require their reimbursement. So they're giving us the work that they've done in order that we make payments. So we're seeing some of those funds move out, which we're very happy to see some of the projects, but for this funding wouldn't occur. And some of the funding that was approved was only a portion of other types of funding. So there's always a concern that other pieces may fall through and those projects won't take shape, but we're starting to see some of those occur. So I wanted to share that with you as well. Any other questions on ARPA at this time? Okay. Moving on. Next up, County Administrator's Report. I'll have Kelly, if you can show those out. The 2-page summary report that you're used to seeing came with your agenda. However, getting the category report to you prepared was actually the first task of my new assistant administrator, who's with us tonight, Karen Bajor, has assumed the seat just behind the county attorney there. And this was one of the things she was able to pull together quickly today for you. It has the update, again, by department. When you're looking at the pages included in your agenda, there are 2 sets of information I just wanted to point out. Typically, I provide you with generally the number of departments who exceeded that 3/4, so that 75%. There are 8 in this third quarter. And typically that's usually 10 to 12. So we're down a little bit from what you normally see as far as the departments that have kind of overshot that 75%. Often that's because of revenue and reimbursement that's required once the quarter closes. You're well acquainted with that. But I do want to point out that 10 of those are with 10 departments included on this list are within that 10%. So they may be coming up in the high 60s, getting into that or the low 80s. Anywhere around there, and I don't think it's cause for great concern yet. I think in some areas that you'll see through the category reports, revenue is lagging depending on the agency that it comes from. But there are 4 departments on that main summary that was in your agenda that you know always don't appear as though they've spent any money this year based upon the fact that the revenue comes in at the beginning. And so those are, it's much more helpful to look at those in the category report, which you now have. If you looking through these, if you have questions, I realize putting it in front of you now doesn't allow you a great chance to process and come up with those questions. Please reach out. Happy to answer or dig in and get some more information. Also have the report that Mr. Lightfoot's been asking for relative to the breakdown of services. So we'll share that out with you this evening as well. Overall, not bad in my opinion. If you look at the fund summary at the top of the report Kelly just handed you, 68% overall personnel spend. Our contractual is always another good indicator. We're at 63%. Revenue is just slightly behind where we like to see it. And then the benefit cost is around 62%. So all good indicators of not being beyond what we planned for this year. In certain areas, of course, the rules change during the year. We try to make those adaptations and bring those before you. But that isn't always possible depending on how long it takes the state to pay or the federal government to reconcile what they owe to the county. So as I said, if you have questions on this third quarter, please let us know and we'll get you answers on that. Any questions at this time on the summary report you were provided? Anything else at this time? Okay. So next up, we'll move to the resolution.
Setting a date for public hearing on proposed local law D for the year 2023 tax cap override for fiscal year 2024. By Mr. Lightfoot.
So this resolution in local law is not an easy one to bring to your attention, to request that you consider an override. I'm very proud of the fact that there's only been one override since the tax cap went into place, and that was the second year, that was 2012. However, I think there's a number of factors this year that make it a requirement that the board consider the possibility of allowing us to override the established tax cap by New York State. One of the main factors at play this year that was not excluded from the tax cap calculation is the intercept that you've heard a lot of talk about when it comes to the federal Medicaid dollars that are coming from the federal government, supposed to come through the state to counties. Earlier this year, just before the late budget was adopted, we realized that that was going to impact counties unexpectedly, unbudgeted for, and unplanned. And for St. Lawrence County, that's $3.1 million. And so the challenge we face now is the kindness of the state in graduating that to a 2-year implementation. So the first year at $750,000, that started April 1st. So not something we budgeted for. The second year is 1.5 million. And as you know, our years cross over because there's our April to March. And the third is full implementation of that 3 million in 2025. And so when you look at not changing anything we do, not buying one more pen or one less pen, that's an increased cost to the county that we didn't plan on. And then you look at other changes the state's making. Assigned counsel, a long overdue change to the rates that we're paying to attorneys to represent the indigent. Now they've stepped forward and they're going to make payment of approximately half of that increase. However, we still have to adopt the increase of the other half, which for St. Lawrence County in the budget is about $430,000. Again, just under that 1%. Now remind you, the tax cap for this year is $1.7 million. So the two numbers I've just given you exceed that, and we haven't even paid people yet for 2024. So then you look at the court decisions, Hennepin, which you heard Mr. Button speak to this evening, and you've been talking about for months. That is a revenue loss to the county of approximately $600,000. And then you look at another court case associated with adoption subsidies. And for us, that was implemented for 2023, but that carries another $500,000 for 2024. So those two court decisions, again, outside of any control the county has, or prudence, or careful budgeting and planning, that's another $1.1 million. And we still haven't paid anybody or paid for the lights to be on. So all of those factors, and then you look at the benefits we choose to provide. Now, health insurance, fortunately, you'll hear very shortly, is flat this year, but all the costs surrounding it are increased, particularly prescriptions, to the tune of $1.2 million. And then you look at New York State retirement increase, again, not something we control the cost of, is going up another $1.2 million. So the story I've just told you, the challenges that we face and the services we still need to provide require me to request that you allow us to override the tax cap for 2024. Questions?
Mr. Snickers.
Just to make sure I heard you right, in regards to the prescriptions, you said 1.2 million. Is that 1.2 million more, or is that the cost of prescriptions?
So that's comprehensively the cost of dental, vision, administration, and prescriptions. That's the overall health increase. The only thing that stays flat for 2024 is the medical insurance component. So I can get you the breakdown between all of those factors. But that overall health benefit is 1.2 million over 2023.
Increase.
Increase, yes. Other questions?
Ruth, thank you, and I know this wasn't easy to bring forward. And it's not easy for me to vote for it. I'm going to. It's always been a perception issue. You know, are we doing our due diligence? I Googled it today and looked up tax cap override, cut budget, you know, cut. We're not spending crazy money. We're living within our means, I believe. And, you know, the state just keeps throwing these things at us, one right after the other, right after the other. So I think it's prudent. I think it gives you leverage. And it gives you some wiggle room to develop a budget, and I have no issue. I brought it to my town board for a discussion last month. There was no issue whatsoever there. So I will support it. So thank you.
Mr. Hall.
Chair. As well, my understanding is that there is a penalty for a county that does not authorize a tax cap override, but then exceeds that limit, in that actual year. Is that the case? And if so, what is that penalty? How's that calculated?
That is in fact true, and if the board were not to override, and in the situation where either they went over or they miscalculated, either can be true. And the county actually did do that in 2017, I believe it was, audited our tax cap by the state in 2018, and we had to set aside a reserve. So you have to set aside a reserve in the budget year where the calculation wasn't correct and or it was exceeded. And that has to be applied to the following year's levy to reduce that overall obligation. And to that point, the treasurer advised me last Thursday that the state reached out to her and they will be auditing our 2024 tax cap.
It's really good.
I don't have a problem voting for it. I think it is about the smartest thing that could be done, needs to be done, should be done. We don't have a crystal ball, so we can't look forward. But we've got to prepare for some of these issues that you just brought up, and they are staggering, the amounts. I'm reading in the media that sales tax revenues are down statewide for the past couple of months. I haven't seen anything from St. Lawrence County for the past couple of months, but I'm assuming that that's the case here too. So I think it's a reasonable and prudent thing to do. I think that, this boils down to everybody in this room looking at what it's going to cost to run their own families and households and having to have a set aside, rainy day fund, call it what you want. But I think that it's the smart thing and a reasonable thing to do is to prepare for something that we don't want to see, but could happen. And the way things are going, it's very likely that it would. The problem in not doing it are just as you told us, and what happened back in 2015, was it? 15, 16? Where we had to put, and I don't know how much it was, but we had to establish a special fund, an interest-bearing fund, to cover what that overage was. And then the reflection of that overage on the following year's budget is we don't need that. Hopefully, we'll never need to use this, but it's there if it gets passed, and I will be supporting it.
Sager?
Did you vote?
I did.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mrs. Doyle, I've always felt that you were conservative in the sense that you're very prudent, and I wouldn't be opposed to this at all. And I don't think you've ever brought anything before this board that was capricious or not needed, and I appreciate doing this, and of course I was.
Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not favor of tax caps, but this seems prudent right now. I think it's something we have to do. Really, the burden is from the state. The state is pushing all of their unfunded mandates onto us. The state has a $227 billion budget. As Senator Steck says, 1.5 times California's budget. That's where it needs to be handled, is at the state. They need to control their spending and help out the counties. I will be supporting this.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I just want to ask for clarification that a vote to allow the county to exceed the tax cap is not a statement that that number would be exceeded, right? Those are different things. My question is, at what point will we have a better, a clearer picture as to the actual likelihood of exceeding that number? Tonight is a committee vote to allow an exceeding of that number. But what point in time do you think it'd be reasonable to know whether or not we'd be exceeding that number?
You'll know at the end of this meeting.
Mr. Forsyth.
Point of order, all we're voting on is for a public hearing.
Yeah.
That's all we're really voting on. Sure.
And I'd just like to point out, it's not even that they are pushing on their unfunded mandate. They're actually stealing money that the federal government is sending us to fund what we're doing. They're just stealing it on the way through from the Fed to us. So that I think it's worse than just mandating something and then asking us to pay for it. Every taxpayer in New York State should have a problem with that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
And I could just add the reserve to Mr. Lightfoot's question earlier, the 340,000. So that reserve would be created.
Front board, is there any old business? Nope.
One more.
Am I not? I have to take that. Connie, I'm Connie's coach, we've got it. Next up is designating the St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce as the St. Lawrence County Tourism Promotion Agency. Motion. Perkins.
So this resolution comes before you, through our co-sponsor, Mr. Lester, with a request to meet a funding deadline. The chamber has asked for the designation a little bit this year. This is separate and distinct from any contractual approval associated with the contract that's been in place that will need to be renewed for 2024. This is simply designating the Chamber of Commerce as the tourism promotion agency.
Mr. Lester. Yeah.
Basically, this is just our commitment from the county to the chamber for the bed tax to help promote people coming to our county, spending money here, supporting our businesses. It's for the I Love New York Tourism Program Promotion Agency. It's like Mr. Doyle said, has to be done by December 5th. This is our commitment to support it. We still have to work out everything else as time goes, with how much is coming in, how much is going out in the bed tax. But this is a big commitment to our county. Thank you.
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Go ahead and old new business. Very old business. Any new business? Committee reports. Mr. Denisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope you can hear me better than I have been able to hear anyone in the room. But as far as the Cornell Cooperative Extension, we had our annual meeting last week, October 19th at 5:30 p.m. And it was a very special meeting because we had the opportunity to dedicate the new Ag Studies Academy classroom to Senator Ritchie. And she was in attendance, and it was well deserved, because without the assistance of Senator Ritchie, we would not have the Ag Studies Academy classroom. And we also presented the Friends of Extension Award to St. Lawrence County Industrial Development Agency, and Patrick Kelly was there to receive that, and that was for their support of Ag and the Extension's mission. And that's all I have to report.
Next up, we have Fish and Wildlife Management Board, Mr. Sheriff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Fish and Wildlife Board met on September 28th. We discussed many items on the agenda. One, they talked about the plans for Indian River and Upper Lower Lakes. WMAs has been available for public comment since October 1st. And there's going to be a press release, and both plans will be available on the DEC website for review and comment. Comments are going to be accepted through November 1st. They also discussed they're also working on an agreement with Ducks Unlimited to rehabilitate the water control structure at Upper and Lower Lakes to improve the function there. Primary improvements will be replacement of the water control gates and wooden stop logs with aluminum stop logs. The big game special licenses, there's hunters. They talked about the hunters who do not quite fit or qualify for either a modified longbow authorization or modified crossbow permit can apply, submit a reasonable accommodation request to be allowed to use an unmodified crossbow during the entire archery season. And the application requires a certification and unmodified crossbow during the entire archery season. The application requires certification from a physician. And if approved, the accommodation is only good for the current season. And hunters will need to reapply for the subsequent years and seasons to follow. They talked about the cormorant situation. They've completed their usual cormorant management activities in the region and collaborated with the R7 fisheries in an effort on Oneida Lake, as well as for the past decade or more. And the numbers were similar to or slightly lower than in 2022 for the cormorant population. The DEC Region 5 and 6 still continuing their process on the town, the trout stream public access verification. These fisheries still have, they've still been working on this Adirondack Brook Trout Pond Management Plan. They anticipate that it will go out for public comment in the next coming months. Several other important issues are addressed in the plan, including securing brook stock, maintaining genetic diversity, developing an information management system, addressing the continuing bait fish problem. And that does about that for some of the things we talked about. But more importantly, I think what this board is interested in is that as we remember, this past June, our board passed a resolution encouraging New York State to improve the some of the inadequacies of the Black Lake boat launch. And so I brought the issue up at a meeting this past June with the Fish and Wildlife Board, presenting them with the resolution and discussion centered around transferring responsibility of the Black Lake Board boat launch to Parks and Rec, from Parks and Rec to DEC. And those in attendance representing DEC and Parks and Rec made the case that DEC is already overwhelmed with current future projects, and they have less money than Parks and Rec, and for the future projects and for the existing projects. And so they argue that it may be quicker for St. Lawrence County to more practical to seek an effort to have Black Lake boat launch moved up on the priority list for the state parks to consider to better serve the access needs of the anglers, the boaters at Black Lake. And so I've been in contact with Senator Walznick's office since the June meeting, and have sent the draft letter to his office for the review that he wanted to see, because he's been involved with it since we passed our resolution. And I've asked the chairman, Alvin Montana, Region 6 Wildlife Management Board, to send his final draft to both Senator Walznick and Assemblyman Scott Gray's office. And at this time, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'll read you the letter of the draft that we did okay at that meeting on the 20th.
Sure, send it.
And this is the letter that Peyton Taylor, who's the Office in Parks, Recreation and Historic Preservation, He's the one this letter was sent to by Alvin Montana, who's the chairman of the Region 6 Fish and Wildlife Board that we're on. He's out of Herkimer County. He says, on behalf of Region 6 Fish and Wildlife Management Board, we would like to recommend the following. After discussion within the Region 6 Fish and Wildlife, it has been brought to our attention by Representative William Sheridan of St. Lawrence County that the Black Lake boat launch in St. Lawrence County is inadequate for to accommodate modern boating equipment. Along with this, the launch is not suitable for the number of boaters per day. And a 2017 New York State Angler Survey showed Black Lake had an estimated economic impact of $16 million. This same study indicated that Black Lake averages 369 anglers per day. This out of date boat launch affects the public's access to the lake, and it's the Region 6 Fish and Wildlife recommendation that the Black Lake boat launch be moved up on the priority list for the state parks to better serve the access and serve the access needs of anglers and boaters on Black Lake. Thank you for taking the time and consideration, Mr. Montana, the chairman. And also, as I say, I've been in contact with the Senator Walznick's office, and they've just gave me an update on what progress that they know has happened since we put our resolution in, and since Senator Walznick and Assemblyman Scott Gray have been on top of this as well. It says it comes from Peyton Taylor, Parks person, who we just talked about her title. It says the new sign has been installed. I know park staff has completed tree trimming along the entrance road. We're still working on revising our permitting requirements for bass tournaments at that location, and we'll have something prepared for distribution this winter. We have also discussed enforcement concerns with park police, and we'll be discussing further with them this fall. Regarding the suggested capital improvements, that's a much longer term process than is not certainly funded. But the needs of all of our standalone boat launches in the region are recognized, and we hope to be able to address those needs as funding becomes available. Unfortunately, some of our boat launches are in significantly greater need of repair than Black Lake, which will likely necessitate difficult choices going forward with limited funds. Thanks, Peyton Taylor. So that's the story on the Black Lake progress, and the Senator's office is going to keep in touch with us to let us know what things they're able to do on their end.
Hey, very thorough. Appreciate that. Since Ms. Tarnelli's out, I'm going to go straight into the Governor Fair Board.
Yeah, Governor Fair had a pumpkin festival, September 23rd and 24th, was pretty well attended. They had an income of $8,658.25, expenses $3,766.46. So they made a small profit of $4,891.39 on that event. Recently, this last weekend, they hosted a trunk or treat event that was pretty well attended also. The school in Governor has pursued quite an interest in getting some property from the Governor Fair Board, or the lifetime members, the ones that control that, in getting some property for their capital improvement project, which will be voted on next month, to use for a football stadium using some state money, but they have to own the property in order to get state funding for that. There doesn't seem to be at this time much interest in letting that happen, so they will probably have to seek to purchase some land over on another part of the village. The Governor Fair Board is currently contacting performers for the 2024 annual fair. Nothing's been decided yet. There's a barn that is in need of a bit of repair, and possibly it's in such state that it may need to be completely replaced. The annual meeting of the Governor Fair Board is set for November 15th, where they'll elect officers at that time. That's all at this time.
Sticking to you, sir, going to the Highway and Solid Waste Committee.
I have nothing further to report on the highway.
Thank you. Moving on to Mr. Regan with the Industrial Development Agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The IDA met last week. Two things to report. We approved a property tax pilot agreement with the new hydrogen facility going into Messina. This is a company that will be bringing in 90 full-time jobs at an average salary of $110,000 of salary and benefits. It's going to have 350 construction jobs at its peak, and it's going to bring a $450 million project into St. Lawrence County. We're talking about almost $500 million. And the company is hoping that if things go well, that they'll be increasing the employment there and increasing their sales. And this will put St. Lawrence County at the cutting edge of a important new energy source. And it's, I don't think a lot of people really have grasped that we're talking about a company that's making a $500 million investment right here in St. Lawrence County at a time when it's extremely difficult to bring new companies into St. Lawrence County that pay above average salaries. The other thing to report is the IDA approved ARPA awards for several outfits. $2,500 for White Pillars Bed and Breakfast in DeKalb Junction. The $5,857 to Cornell Cooperative Extension for the County Animal Rescue Team trailer. $35,000 in Brazier Falls for the Tri-Town Kids Daycare Program for daycare renovations. $1,400 for a worker training program at Hoosier Magnetics to help train their people on auditing procedures. $14,000 for, again, for Tri-Town Kids daycare program in Brazier Falls to help them train 5 new hires. $10,000 for John P. Coakley and Sons in Canton to train 3 new hires. And in Governor, $25,000 for Empire State Mines to train 5 new hires. So it's good to see some of our companies expanding, adding additional employees, giving them the training they need to give them the skills they need to help these companies be competitive. And thank you.
Jim, I'm really excited about this Air Products green hydrogen facility. It's been reported that the pilot agreement starts at 5%, increasing over 20 years, 5% more each year. Do you know how much the county will see as a result of that?
over the length of the contract, it will, from right now, it's, current Forest Products is clearing the field, and that field pays several $1,000s in taxes. This will bring in, increase that by more than 5,000 times over the life of the 20-year contract. I don't have the figures, but we can send it to you on the breakdown year by year. And, but I think the important thing to keep in mind is the company gets nothing unless they build the facility and bring in these new jobs and this new investment that'll go onto the tax roll and increase the property tax payments from essentially nothing, several $1,000s a year on a empty field, and make it into one of the major industrial property taxpayers in St. Lawrence County. But I'll get you those numbers.
Next up, a recreational trails advisory board.
Nothing to report at this time.
Sure. Mr. Forsythe, sorry, Mr. Forsythe, St. Lawrence River Valley Redevelopment Agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not met in 2 months now. But I will say I had a local building inspector reach out to me last week with an issue of a restaurant that needed a hood. We didn't have the financing, wondered if the RVRDA would be involved or have any avenue to help. I reached out to Patrick. I sent him a text. He responded he would look into it. And I got a response the next morning that they were all set, and it went through, and I'd like to appreciate him and thank him. I thought that was a good step forward. Yeah.
Mr. Webster, Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, first I'd like to thank Mr. Bendix, and I had some internet problems. My internet and phone lines and everything went down yesterday at 6 o'clock, come up 5 minutes before I got here. So, the out of the area destination marketing platform was launched in October, mid-October. Includes 29 properties, 40 points of interest, 106 more properties are currently being processed for build out, with 40 additional points of interest expected to be integrated by 2024. You're basically be able to go online, search what St. Lawrence County has, and be able to book your hotels or your destinations right online. I think that'll help a lot. Also the Chamber's integration's been going good with Ogdensburg. Ogdensburg is now operating the St. Lawrence County Ogdensburg Chamber. The Canton Chamber has moved into the county chamber's offices in Messina. They're still trying to just work out the bugs down there, but it's made it nice because they can do a lot more in a lot less area. Also, they have a bunch of upcoming events. November 1st is going to be a lunch and learn webinar. November 3rd is going to be Ogdensburg Greater Chamber annual celebration dinner at the Grand View Inn in Ogdensburg. On November 15th, the business spotlight is at Casablanca and Governor, co-hosted with the Governor Chamber. And in December 1st and 2nd will be another craft fair and wine holiday market at Maxey Hall. Now, the last one had over 2,500 people and over 80 vendors. That's a lot of wine. So that's kind of looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Okay. Speak as much. That doesn't happen very much. I was this.
Thank you. Next up, Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Directors.
Soil and water next on October 19th. And the crop specialist reported that there was 300 acres cover crops this past year, which has exceeded the number of acres previous year. State representative provided the surveys in soil and water. We talked about the AEM grants that most of them were funded for, protecting the sources of drinking water. um, The watershed, for drinking water. There was also a discussion on biochar grazing, which was a news thing. Apparently, it's the grazing of cattle in wooded areas, and the compaction of their excrement with the wooded products. There's a value in carbon sequestration. And Patrick would know a lot more about it than I do. It was a new term. Also the other thing, we call it silvo pasture, and that's the benefits of pasturing in wooded areas. Soil and water staff will be increasing the focus on these species next year. And that was pretty much it.
All right, moving forward to the 2024 tentative budget presentation.
If you could, take a short recess. We will be prepared and the this evening, and there will be no executive session.
Mr. Button.
It's fun.
It's gonna be upset.
Can Larry still see? Larry can still see this, right?
Are we unmuted with this? Larry, can you still see, can you see the slide? Larry, still with us?
Larry's in a pit stop.
Where is he?
Huh?
Is he traveling?
I don't know where he is.
No, it's-
You home?
No.
Well, good evening and welcome to the last portion of the show. This evening, I'm presenting the 2024 tentative budget to the Finance Committee. And we enjoy the luxury of having a committee of the whole as it relates to budget review. And for a number of years, the budget was presented to the board being a board meeting. However, that wasn't proper procedure in that county law requires the Finance Committee take up budget first. And so here we are this evening. Wanted to let you know that the methods for preparing the budget are changing. The strategies approaching line item budgeting, spending lots of time within each dollar associated with the budget, while still critically important to me, aren't necessarily the trend that they're approaching these days. The strategy is becoming more programmatic, evaluating programs for their credibility or their success, defining those metrics, and then determining where your funding goes as a result of the programs. And now that hasn't been a luxury that we've had for many years, because for so many years, we looked at every single penny and determined whether or not we could or couldn't even do this program. Now we have the luxury of having discussions about the effectiveness of our programs and how well and what directions we want to go. So I just want to say before we begin that I'm proud of the staff, I'm proud of the team, and I'm proud of this budget. It allows us to plan for the future, to prepare both financially and strategically, and to position the county to deliver long-term stability for services mindful of the tax rate. Slide. So while this looks like a long list, it won't be too painful. I'll go through the items. We're going to talk about the approval process. I'd like to make sure both you and the public understand the process we undertake to bring you an almost $300 million budget. The goals that we have, the challenges that we face, to provide you, of course, with that comparative summary. How do we look for 2024 compared to the budget you adopted just 12 months ago? A summary of our fund balances and the reserves that you've created over the last 5 years. The capital projects and infrastructure, so I'll talk about those within the confines of both fund balance and the reserves. The contingency account, I'd like to provide that for you in detail, along with the capital reserve that sits in that contingency. Then, of course, to give you what the levy is, what the true value tax rate will be, or is recommended in the tentative budget for 2024. Provide you with an understanding of our workforce totals as recommended. The health benefit totals, we talked a little bit about that during the override resolution. And then ultimately the impact of this recommended tentative budget on homeowners. We'll go over quickly the review options that you have for November and what the schedule is for the approvals in the beginning of December. So the preparation process is in 5 stages. The first begins in May and wraps up around the end of July. And that's when we open the system. We do a training every year. We provide the opportunity for payroll to get involved with personnel. And we open the budget system in Munis up to departments to make their entries. We limit some of the discussions that need to happen with the budget team, but by and large, they're able to enter contractual items, to make some adjustments, to make revenue projections, and also to make requests for the following year. We shut that down and then the budget team takes over, and that's level 2. And that begins mostly end of July, beginning of August, and throughout the month of August. We meet with every department, sometimes 2 and 3 times. This year we changed the strategy and we looked at department function, and then we set aside a separate day entirely just to talk about personnel. So not every department without personnel changes had to come back. But if there were requests for new positions or changes in function, that's when we pulled in our HR staff and had them present along with payroll. And then tonight, the culmination of level 3, which is following all those discussions, following the budget team deliberations. I look at our goals and I make final changes to the budget that you're going to see tonight. Next up will be the legislative review process, and that will be available to you for the month of November. For the last 8 years, the way that we've gone about it is we've taken the jurisdictional committees, operations, services, and finance, split out the departments that normally report to those jurisdictional committees, and I've done a slide presentation to give you an update and highlight the areas within those committees and allowed you the opportunity to ask questions in those arenas. Before ultimately at level 5, we hold a public hearing about the budget, and then the adoption vote is requested. The budget has to be adopted before December 15th by common law. Slide. So the goals. Those of you who've both been visiting that are now legislators, and those of you who sat on this board, some of my goals a few years ago, starting in 2021, coming out of the pandemic, started with the 3 R's. Refocus, following the pandemic, reinvest, and redefine. And we're at redefine stage now. So I'll just take a couple minutes and talk about the refocus and reinvest years. We've begun a period of decentralization that you're well acquainted with since we started with 3 outposts for highway. And we now also have 2 offices open for social services. We've taken a very different approach to bringing services to where people are rather than trying to get everyone to Canton. Though I won't pretend we didn't have some satellite offices around the county, they've mostly been in our population centers. But we're really taking a different approach to delivering services to people where they are. We're concentrating care and reducing the satellite presence. You're familiar with reducing our presence in Governor and in Messina for our addiction services. But we've opened an opioid treatment program, and we've started a mobile clinic. So those areas can still be served. It just looks a little bit different than it did. And we can't pretend that telehealth hasn't had a huge impact on the interaction between healthcare, mental health, behavior. So we've also been looking at reinvesting and renovating in the county clerk's office, which will host an open house for you very soon. Finally, that was able to take place in social services. We're looking at floor by floor renovations to bring new space by occupying the other locations, as well as looking at the systems and how they would work best. Also, county attorney's office, as you voted tonight and voted last services meeting, we'll be moving the staff over to the county attorney's office, opening up more space in the H.G. Smith building. We also have been reinvesting in nutrition for our seniors. We saw our numbers double during the pandemic years, and we're able to now continue those, but it has a cost attached. You'll hear a little bit more about that as well. We opened a recycling center at the beginning of this year because the need existed, and we live far from where those services are provided. We're also continuing to reinvest with the interoperability projects with towers across the county, improving to construct 3 more, hopefully next year, as well as our radio project, which will transform communication across the county for all of our providers. Bye. And here's some of the challenges that we face. So the first one we talked about a little bit ago, which is the tax cap. Now the tax cap when it comes to budget, this year is $1.7 million. Now we're held hostage a little bit because in the last 5 years, we've stayed under the tax cap, sometimes by $2 million. The total over the last 5 years that we haven't gone to the tax cap is $5.1 million. And so in being responsible, in taking an approach that we don't want to go not even above the tax cap, but to the tax cap, that $5 million was left on the table. Now, in the discussions around whether or not you can use prior year advantage or this year's tax cap, that's the number that we're given. The state made a slight concession relative to retirement this year. I believe for us that was less than $50,000. They did not exclude the EF map take back. So the request to override the tax cap is just under $600,000. That's the number. The intercept of 3.1 million, when the intercept is complete, the assigned council rates, the number for us is 430,000. We also know the capital project coming forward for the public safety complex will exceed the $5 million that were set aside in the ARPA funds. And that will come from our savings, that will come from our fund balance. It's a wonderful place to be that we don't have to look at issuing debt to complete a capital project. But that will be a challenge for us. Renovations to the family court to prepare for the election next fall, and a seated second family court judge in 2025. We'll need chambers, we'll need to relocate some staff that existed in the courthouse now. I mentioned the home delivered meal operations and equipment. That's another $600,000 just for the nutrition program. and another 100,000 for equipment. Our opioid treatment outpatient and incarcerated populations, while that only says 125,000, you're well aware that that number is extraordinarily higher. Although at this time, both the federal and state government are providing funding, but we don't expect that to continue indefinitely. We know as soon as we get a program up and running, the rules change and the funding goes around. So what I said in our first year was this year, the cost of the taxpayer should not exceed $100,000. And so we've used some opioid settlement funds, and we're also using some grant funds to offset that overall cost. But I believe this year is going to be 125,000 total. And the increase of inflation since 2021 has been 7%, 6%, and so far this year, 3.7%, according to the Bureau for Labor Statistics. So that's working against us on all fronts. Fine. Now the comparative budget summary, so that you can look at the adopted budget for this year, being the 273. The request for 2024 is 296.5, an increase of $22.8 million, or 8.3%. The revenue coming along just ahead of that at 20.5 million is going from 221 to 242 million. The difference is the levy. And that's our county cost number at 54 million. Now the tax cap has been presented to residents as a 2% tax cap. That's hardly ever true. This year, and it certainly bodes to our advantage, it's 3.29%. So when we look at what that 4.5%, that's the difference of the 1%, of the just under 600,000 that I'm requesting, we'd be allowed to override the tax cap for 2024. And the applied fund balance this year, you'll remember last year we used it for stop loss health insurance, for the solid waste equipment, and for solid waste recycling center to offset those costs. This year, we're not appropriating anything in the budget at this time because we fully expect to spend on capital projects from our fund balance. Fine. So now we move into the summary of our fund balances. Because lots of people talk about how much money we have and how unfair it is that we tax. However, there are categories that are required to set aside. I'd like to point out some benefits of having some funds available. The general fund is first, and that at the end of year 2022 is $57 million. Now, if you look at road fund and road machinery, in 2021, we started our outpost projects. If you look at the amount that was in before our project, the difference in the funds from 2020 to 2021 paid for 2 of our outposts. So we only financed 1. That's a luxury we didn't have before. We were planning to issue debt for 2 of our outposts. The board made, I think, a good decision, reduce those, and really utilize almost all the fund balance in both road and road machinery. And now they're being built back, slow and steady. Liability and casualty, you'll see that also in our reserves. Those are the funds for our self-insurance. And our totals, we have liabilities sitting out there for workers' comp and solid waste. That reduces that number because of the liability. And in 2018, the board allowed reserves, the beginning of reserves for St. Lawrence County. And those reserves, that 19.8 sits inside that overall general fund balance. That's not another $19 million. That's an earmarked or buckets, if you think, set aside for each of these purposes. So the first 2 we created were funding the employee benefit accrued liability. That is fully funded at this point at $2 million. The capital will continue building. Those are the funds we'll use to offset the capital costs so we don't have to issue debt. Our liability and self-insurance, if you add those numbers up, they won't total, but that's because we pulled from that reserve to pay for our stop loss insurance. Again, not having to put it on the taxpayers. Just vehicle reserve, we believe that that will be fully funded at $1 million. So we'll continue making recommendations for the next few years, much like we did with the accrued liability reserve, so that it's fully funded. And once fully funded, we no longer set aside funds for those. We'll leave that in. And the blinded foreclosure properties, that's a new fund now at $500,000. And that's for the residential properties. You'll also remember for the ENRS, which we do our commercial properties, I have a note here at the bottom. You can't see, but it'll be in your packet that you take with you tonight. we made a one-time contribution of 10 years for the ENRS out of the fund balance for this year of $500,000. So that fund now sits at $597,000 available to do those investigations on the property so that they get into and back on the tax rolls. And then separately, you'll remember this year, we also set up a specific capital reserve for the first time pre-funding equipment purchases in 2025 or 2026. We've never done that before. So when it comes time again, we won't have to issue debt that we currently have on the equipment we replaced almost 10 years ago. This will allow us this year, next year, and the year we purchase to set aside funds from the year's production, from the end of the year results associated with the funds we both have because sales tax is performing well, because we didn't overspend, but because we're being smart with how we're using taxpayer money. The NAs at the far end, those are new reserves. You'll be able to see that as well. You're established, these two first reserves were established in 18, and liability self-insurance was established in 19. Slide. So next up is the breakdown between contingency and capital reserve for 2024. I'd like to make sure you're well acquainted with what is in contingency, targeted and untargeted. Our capital reserve is the first item, and the breakdown is on the far side. Our fund balance policy I brought to you this summer, as I do every year, and the board indicated an interest in continuing to, though it's reduced by 150,000. Energy and fuel still a little higher than we'd like to see it, so we have some funds set aside there, but it's reduced by $244,000 this year, or 144,000, I'm sorry, because we budgeted up 3.3% in budgets, department budgets. We're continuing the practice of 75% of overtime and 25% of overtime being in contingency, so that the department has to come back and have a conversation with the board about what's happening. I think the board stayed very well versed in the issues we were seeing in the jail, because there had to be those overtime conversations, resulted in a significant drop in overtime because there are more positions there now. So those types of conversations can be very productive in controlling the budgetary spend. Compensation. We talked about the anticipated negotiations for next year. Also have 500,000 set aside this year that we'd like to bring in consideration to set those aside in a reserve for negotiations that will begin mid-year in 2024. The MAP program, again, this is still an unknown. We have budgeted more in the department. You'll remember I budgeted $550,000 this year. We moved it all in February. It's still an unpredictable expense for us. We're still learning the business of this mandated program, but at the end of the day, we still have bills to pay and people to take care of. So I have money set aside here in case that budget continues to grow. And we're averaging approximately half the population in the correctional facility enrolled in the program. Vacation buyback benefit that the board provided a little more latitude on this year is being utilized by both the unions that are enrolled and the unrepresented group. And then the healthcare buyout is very slowly and carefully creeping up. We started out around 180,000. We're seeing more participation, which I think will also be fed into the negotiation conversation next year. This is not budgeted at the department level at all. However, it's paid from the department level because we're not sure when people come in and leave that we should be budgeting in those lines, so we leave it here. But we're averaging about 225, 230,000 a year. And the untargeted, generally speaking, I think the comfort level for a contingency on a project or contingency in a budget is between 10 and 20%. 1.3 million of a $296 million budget is not 10%. But it's increased from the average that I used to work with, which was 500,000. And then briefly within your capital reserve, I'd like to continue the hazard tree removal with some transition at soil and water. We haven't moved in that direction, though they're rapidly moving through the ARPA spend on the Emerald Ash Borer, as well as some of the hazard tree spend. I'd like to, after 2024, if the board agrees, I'd like to move the hazard tree removal into the forestry budget. I'd like to leave it here to make sure it's going to be used, because that should be part of our operations. There's another invasive I think that we need to be aware of, and money needs to be spent to take care of these issues. Information technology, looking at an email for all employees. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but some of our staff don't sit in an office and in front of a computer all day, but we still need to be able to communicate with them besides on a bulletin board. So we really want to move in the direction, it's roughly about $11,000 to make sure everyone has email. In this day and age, I think that's critical. We're also looking at computer replacements, mobile device management, and a few other areas. This year was a tremendous year for information technology, also with the upgrade. And I know it's been challenging with email and our munis system. Family court renovations for engineering. I think there will be a share between the courts and the county on that project, but I set some money aside so that we can get that project going. Office for the aging, I referenced the $613 spend is actually $7 because we moved funds here for both the refrigerator, a commercial refrigerator, as well as vehicles, because their routes are so much greater and they need more equipment for their staff. Equipment for the mailroom, we're looking at better ways to deliver. With the satellite offices, we have to be able to get folks out and back. So we're looking at some equipment for the mailroom to make that easier, which all of these items, any of these items, the board has to approve before any of the spend occurs. So these are the targeted areas. We also may come into a situation where something comes up and we have to change the focus, change the target. Lastly, facility updates for 100,000 and fleet vehicles. We have been in an unusual situation this year without being able to change out the fleet. So we are at least 9 months behind at this point, and I'm not sure what the rest of the year will look like just yet. It's very unpredictable to be able to be on a 5-year cycle in the last couple of years to get vehicles, to trade vehicles. While the trade values are high, they're difficult to get. So we're planning $55,000 for that. Quick synopsis of our workforce and our benefits. On the left side, you can see our overall FTE total between board action and recommendations by the budget team goes from 864 FTEs to 882, a difference of 17.86. And it actually should be around 19. The action of the budget team, the net impact is a -2 FTEs. Benefits total, I was talking about this a little bit earlier. The hospital and medical insurance is actually flat for next year, but the prescription costs, and we'll break that down when we go through health insurance at committee, is quite a bit higher than last year. But it overall has an impact of 1.2 million. And our average benefit increase after the changes that the union worked with us in 2020 has been about an average increase of 2.65 million or 37% from 2020 to 2024. And the FTE count increase is on average 2.9% per year. The breakdown for our FTEs is 832.5 full-time and 50.3 less than full-time. And that would include the employees that we've provided the opportunity for temporary or for less than full-time status. Okay. So here's the spoiler. Here's the levy and the true value tax rate for 2024. We're going to go from 760 in the tentative budget down 5.9% to $7.15 per thousand. 45-cent reduction. Over 2 years, as you're familiar, we also went last year from 802 to 760. So in 2 years, it's an 87-cent reduction. We are taking great advantage this year, and that's another reason for the tax cap override request of an 11% equalization rate change. Sorry, assessed valuation rate change. This is the year to move the base. The overall increase for the levy change has been 3.29% for 4 years. $1.13 since 2020. Our services, by and large, have remained, if not grown, and we're able to reduce the burden on the taxpayers. And speaking of homeowners, slide. Here is your homeowner impact slide. So the easiest is your $100,000 home assessed valuation of $87 plus in taxes. Now this is predicated on no change in the assessed valuation of your home. We don't control that. We don't do countywide assessing, so that's independent of us. But the assessed valuation impact got the dollar amount at the top for last year and this year, and the difference. And you'll be taking all of this with you tonight. Fine. So now on to the review options the board has. As I mentioned to begin with, there are two. We can continue the process as it has been standing for 8 years with the jurisdictional committee review. I have the dates here. And the way that we would do it is conduct the committee business. We try to maintain a lighter agenda for those committees. And then we begin immediately following each of the committees with the departments that report to them. I'll present some highlights for you, take any questions for each of the departments. If there's a specific department you'd like present to ask specific questions to, we can arrange that. This has been the way that we have done it in the last few years. And next slide, Lucas. The alternative option is the individual department reviews, and I've included the dates. That's a Monday, Wednesday schedule, I believe, except for the week of Thanksgiving. It's a Monday, Tuesday schedule, finishing at finance or the finance committee to deliver to the Board of Legislators. Both of these schedules would provide the opportunity for us to notice a public hearing and adoption of the 2024 budget at the December 4th meeting. Fine. And rather than say any questions, I just wanted to finish with a quote that I'll read to you. We have a transformative year ahead for St. Lawrence County. While we're redefining the role of county government, New York State is redefining support provided to counties to deliver mandated programs. With the support of the Board of Legislators, the county can once again reduce the true value tax rate for the taxpayers of the county. We can continue to provide services, address the major infrastructure needs of the county, while looking ahead to maintain a stable tax rate, focus on delivering services, and working to reduce the burden on property taxpayers to do it. So as a reminder, the cap is 1.7 this year. The request is for 2.3. $579,885 more than the cap currently allows. And I did just want to say, and read this in my budget message, this year I'm going to dedicate the 2024 budget, tentative budget, to Michael Cunningham. And lastly, you'll receive your tentative budget books at the board meeting next week, but I have a copy of the budget in brief, as well as the slide deck for you to take with you. Any questions? Mr. Chair, turn it back over to you.
Great job. Seriously, nice presentation. It was nice. I think everyone agrees with that. It's a lot of work for that. And seriously, brother. Oh,
Okay.
all right.
Yes.
If no further business, I get a motion to adjourn, Mr. Fay. Thank you. Adjourn.
Thank you. Clap.